Here, read this.
Woof.
So I've been reading recently about Kenneth Grahame's interest in ghosts. Near where he lived in Blueberry, there were several houses said to be haunted, and he visited at least one of them. Perhaps rather more hopefully than fearfully, he said it would be something of a relief to come across a ghost, given the gibbering simulacra found amongst the corporeal population. He felt he'd have more in kin with a ghost with their tact and discretion. And the more you read about Grahame's life, the more you think he might be right. He seems to have been something of a ghost in a few spheres of his day-to-day life. Friends describe him, Graham Robertson, for example, who was Wind in the Willow's first illustrator, but also a great friend of Kenneth Grahame's, describes him as being having a great talent for silence, which is not the most social of gifts, falling, as Robertson puts it, silently into the brink of nirvana, or as Grahame himself puts it, attempting to commune trancidly with the woods. He was also something of a ghost in his marriage. Elspeth Grahame felt so abandoned and rejected by Kenneth that she took to writing to the wife of Thomas Hardy for tips on how to deal with remote, perhaps amiable, but definitely not passionate husbands. And eventually he also became something of a ghost in his work, in writing. When pressed by Clayton Hamilton about when the next novel would be coming out, this is after Wind in the Willows, Grahame complained that to toil all day at making sentences means to waste time indoors, whilst the wind might be blowing through the willows and his favourite pig might be about to give birth. Difficult to imagine the author communing transidly with a pig in labour, but there you go. Patrick Chalmers, who became Kenneth Grahame's first biographer, explained part of the challenge facing him as follows. Kenneth Grahame was sufficient unto himself, his life seeming therefore more lifeless than other lives. Going on to say that amongst his friends, he was respected, admired, loved, but never known. Consequently, Chalmers' biography, which in fairness was written only a year or so after Grahame had died, relies heavily on Grahame's own writings. It's full of excerpts of essays and incidental bits of writing, which makes for a very mixed reading experience. It's interesting to note that Grahame himself really didn't like his work being excerpted. He always refused when someone asked to produce an abridged Wind in the Willows, for example. And cutting from Chalmers' speculations and reportage, wherever he can get it, with Grahame's often brilliant, beautiful prose, but really has no connection whatsoever to his biography, but might have been written wherever Chalmers is in his life, is a very sort of jolting, stop and start kind of reading experience. You can tell how scarce the material Chalmers has to work with by what he focuses on. There are 3 or 4 references to how much Kenneth Grahame liked omelettes and how good he got at making them. In any other biography, this would be a funny running joke, perhaps, when you had lots of other colour to fill in the sort of major themes. But when the character of the subject is as sparsely filled in as Chalmers is of Grahame, unfortunately, it becomes one of the signature things about him. And liking omelettes is all well and good, but it shouldn't be a load-bearing aspect of anyone's personality, I don't think. Denied any glimpses of his subject's inner life, Chalmers has to speculate quite frequently. When he talks about Grahame's early literary success, he writes something like, "Walking down Threadneedle Street, I wonder, did Kenneth glow with newfound accomplishment? I think not." Or as if he is reminiscing about some distant, semi-mythical Greek, I best like to think of Grahame in those Cornish days of blue jerseys and big breakfasts. But even Grahame's recent biographers, like Elizabeth Galvin, have had to speculate where they can't find the answers. Galvin suspects that perhaps Grahame was confused about his sexuality. She ponders whether or not he might have had a homosexual relationship with Grahame Robertson, his friend who was homosexual, perhaps explaining his emotional abandonment of Elspeth. It is a very, very sad story. There's something sadder about a husband who becomes a mildly interested acquaintance rather than a grumpy opponent. And after they lose their only son, Alistair, known as Mouse, Elizabeth Galvin talks about how they only retreated into themselves even more, although there was perhaps a second blossoming of friendship between husband and wife, even if it was in the face of really terrible grief. Now, the Grahams always publicly described Alistair's death as an accident, although it was very likely a suicide. And after Graham himself died, Elspeth was anxious enough to know the truth that she contacted a medium to confirm, as Galvin writes, that Alistair was resting peacefully. The answer that the medium brought back was that Alistair was very sorry that he had failed. Elspeth also became the curator of Graham's literary afterlife, protecting and promoting his work to keep his ghost content.